I didn't ask questions when the orders came in. In my line of work, you learn to read between the silences, and the silence on this particular transfer was screaming. I wasn't briefed, wasn't told what the new assignment entailed. Just a printed directive in a sealed envelope with a clearance code I'd never seen before and a flight schedule with no return date. When I asked my commanding officer what the nature of the mission was, he didn't meet my eyes. Just said, "You'll find out when you land," and walked away like he'd already started trying to forget me. That's when I knew this wasn't standard. The next morning, I was flown to a restricted airfield outside Anchorage and led, without explanation, onto a military helicopter marked only with a faded naval insignia and 2 stenciled letters I didn't recognize. There were no windows inside. The flight lasted over 4 hours. I only knew we were descending when the noise of the rotors grew sharper, and the metallic hum in the cabin shifted pitch like it was cutting through salt. When the side door opened, all I saw was fog. Thick, colorless mist rolling across jagged rock and blackened pine trees, the wind hissing like it was trying to keep a secret. The cold slapped my face as I stepped down. The landing pad was cut directly into the rock, no guardrails, just a rusted stairwell leading downward into a concrete bunker. My escort didn't say a word, just handed me a sealed black envelope, nodded once, and lifted off again. No salutes, no good luck, just gone. The envelope contained a key card with no name, no rank, just a red band around the edge and a number. 7. There was also a small piece of paper, handwritten, not typed. Do not use the intercom unless instructed. Do not leave your sector without escort. Do not speak to the water. I thought it was a joke at first, but I tucked it into my jacket anyway. The stairwell spiraled downward far longer than it should have. The temperature didn't change, but the pressure did. Like the air grew thicker the deeper I went. Finally, I reached a steel door embedded in the wall, no handle, just a glowing sensor. I held the card up, and the door hissed open to a hallway lit by low amber lights, and a silence I can only describe as aggressive. There was no chatter, no overhead buzz, no equipment whirring, just the hollow echo of my boots on polished concrete. The base stretched out beneath the surface like a wound in the earth. Long, empty corridors with frosted glass panels. Doors with labels scratched off. Monitors flickering static. I passed a man in a lab coat. He didn't look at me, didn't slow down. Just walked past like he was late for something that didn't want him there. My assigned room was on Deck C, Sector 4. It looked like any other bunk I'd stayed in, except the mirror was bolted to the wall at an odd angle and there was no clock anywhere. I dropped my gear and sat for a moment, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did, not at first. Then, without fanfare, a light above the door blinked green and the terminal on the wall came to life. The screen didn't show a welcome message. Just coordinates. A timestamp, a room number, 0014B. No context, no mission, just expectation. I found the room after navigating a maze of hallways, many of which weren't marked, and some of which doubled back on themselves like the base was trying to confuse me. When I finally reached 014B, I paused outside. The door was open. Inside was a large tank, filled with something darker than water. A man in a jumpsuit sat beside it, facing away, watching a monitor. He turned when he heard me, nodded once, and said, "You're the new tech." I started to answer, but he was already pointing at the panel. "Just observe. Don't touch. If it flickers blue, call control. If it pulses red, leave immediately." "What's in the tank?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just stared at it for a moment, then muttered, "Not what. When." The monitor displayed what looked like sonar waves. But they didn't move like sonar. They pulsed in slow, deliberate arcs. The room was silent, but I could feel something behind the glass of the tank, just on the edge of perception. Pressure. Presence. The man, his badge read M. Bowers, stood slowly. "I need coffee," he said. "Stay here. Don't talk to it." I watched him leave. The door slid shut behind him. The tank sat motionless. The room temperature dipped. I checked the monitor. The pulse was steady. Then it blinked. Once. Blue. I reached for the intercom, remembering the note. I hesitated. The blue light blinked again. Then a voice came through the speaker. Not mine, not Bowers. Just a voice. Soft. Wet. "You are the 7th, it said. The intercom wasn't even on. I stepped back. My breath fogged. The tank didn't move, but the pulse slowed. My heart matched it, beat for beat. When Bowers returned, I didn't say anything. He looked at me for a long time, then walked over to the panel. He stared at the pulse, then at me. Did it speak? I said nothing. He sighed. Don't worry, he said. First time is always small. It's just testing your echo. That night, I couldn't sleep. I didn't dream, but I woke up gasping, the taste of brine in my throat. My boots were soaked with salt water, but the floor was dry. The next morning, I found a folded piece of paper under my door. Same handwriting. It said, "Do not listen too long. It remembers voices." I still don't know who wrote it. I didn't ask, because some part of me had already started to believe that whoever left the note might not still be here. Or worse, they might still be here, but not entirely themselves. And I think the base knew I was starting to understand. I stopped trusting the lights after 3 days. They didn't flicker the way faulty bulbs do. They breathed, dimmed in and out like lungs struggling against pressure. There were no technicians who came to fix them. No work orders logged. But they always dimmed when I turned corners near the central column, the one that descended deeper than any map dared to show. That was where the atmosphere thickened, where the metal walls began to sweat, where gravity seemed to pull at the angles of your body in ways that made your spine ache and your balance feel 2 degrees off, like you were leaning towards something you couldn't see but knew was down. The place was alive. That much was clear now. Not literally, not with tissue and bone, but with rhythm, with memory, with hunger. The routine settled in quickly. Wake when the room lights clicked on. Report to the same control center with the same 2 lines of duty. Monitor and log. No questions, no deviation. Just numbers on a screen and occasional calls over the comms from the other sectors. At first I thought we were all doing the same job. Tech work, radar observation, acoustic pattern decoding. But over time I noticed discrepancies. Subtle ones. Some staff had no name tags. Some were only seen once. There were doors they entered that never opened for anyone else, and whole levels, stripped from directories, that Torres refused to even glance at when I pointed them out. He had started talking more since the tank incident. Not fully, not all at once, but in slow confessions. Half sentences whispered in passing, like a man afraid of completing the thoughts aloud. He told me about the original base, how it wasn't naval at all, not really. That it began as a geological research station under a different name. A cover project. A test. That the first people sent here were academics, geophysicists, oceanographers. Smart people. Curious people. People who listened too hard. They built it on a shelf, he said one day, while we pretended to recalibrate a sonar panel. On top of a fault line that doesn't show up on any plate boundary. You ever hear of a hole that sinks without displacing water? That's what they found. What was in it? I asked. He didn't look at me. Not what. It. After that, I started keeping notes. Not on the terminals, they wiped clean at SO 200 every day without prompt. But in a small notebook I stole from the supply locker on the upper level. I hid it in the ceiling vent of my room, behind a loose grating I pretended not to notice. I wrote down sounds, frequencies, timestamps, names. But I also wrote feelings. Because that was the thing nobody talked about. The psychological erosion. The dreams. The noise beneath the noise. The sensation that when you stood still for too long, something was standing behind you, not breathing, just waiting. On my 7th day, I found a hallway that didn't exist. I had taken a wrong turn, or maybe the right one. The layout of the base made less sense the longer I stayed. Corridors looped into themselves. Stairwells led to identical levels marked with different letters. It was like the deeper you went, the more the structure bent around some gravitational center no one wanted to acknowledge. This hallway was narrow, no door labels, no floor tiles, just bare concrete, damp with condensation that smelled like rust and something older, something like salt and copper and rot. The lights buzzed faintly overhead, and the hum of the base's main systems was muted here, as if sound refused to echo in that space. As I walked, I noticed indentations along the walls. At first I thought they were scratches, but when I passed under the next light, I saw them clearer. Symbols. Not written with tools. Impressed into the concrete, as if the building had softened at some point and allowed something to press its language into the walls. They weren't letters. They weren't art. They were instructions. I couldn't read them, but I understood them in the way you understand a scream through a closed door. I turned the corner and found a bulkhead sealed with 6 manual locks. No keypad. No electronic access. Just old metal levers chained in place. And beside the door, a camera. It didn't face the hallway. It pointed directly down at the floor. I stepped closer, trying not to breathe too loud. And that's when I noticed something worse. The floor beneath the camera wasn't the same color. It was darker, like something had seeped up from beneath and left a stain no amount of bleach could erase. I backed away. Later, I brought it up to Torres. Described what I saw. He paled and told me never to go back there. That's near zero, he said. That door wasn't supposed to still exist. What's behind it? He didn't answer. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was scared, but because I heard something. In the walls, beneath the bed, in the ventilation shafts. Not voices exactly, but rhythm. A beat. Slow. Methodical. Like the tank's pulse, only larger. Vaster. As if the entire base had a second heartbeat, buried beneath the structure and vibrating up through its spine. I pressed my hand against the floor and felt it. And something pressed back. I woke up the next morning to find the note gone from under my pillow. In its place was something else. A small chip of what looked like bone, carved with a symbol that matched the ones I saw in the hallway. I took it to Torres. He stared at it for a long time, then said, "You should flush it." "Why?" "Because if you keep it long enough, it will start writing back." I didn't flush it. I buried it in the wall behind my locker, between 2 loose panels. That same day, we received a new technician. Female, pale, hollow-eyed. Her ID badge was laminated incorrectly. The text faded like it had been reprinted too many times. No one introduced her. She said her name was Myra, but when I said it back to her, she flinched, as if hearing her name spoken aloud caused pain. She worked the radar bay next to mine. I watched her one night through the glass. She was mouthing something while watching the waveform scroll across the monitor. The same phrase, over and over. Her lips moved, her eyes unblinking. And when I pressed my headset to listen, I heard nothing. Just static. But under it, very faint, I caught a sound. The tank's pulse. But slower. As if something deeper had begun listening. I don't know what the Navy thinks we're doing here. But I no longer believe we're containing anything. I think we're the ones being studied, monitored. We build cameras. We build sensors. But the deeper this place goes, the more I suspect the architecture was never for us. It was always for it. We just moved in after it was already dreaming. It started with the clocks. Just small things at first. Discrepancies. My wristwatch would be 3 minutes behind the wall panel in the corridor. The terminal by the mess hall would flash a time that never matched the intercom schedule. I assumed it was just neglect. A base this remote, this secret, didn't have the luxury of fine-tuned calibration. But then it started changing mid-shift. Not gradually, not drifting. Jumping. Resetting without pattern. I'd look away, glance back, and find it 10 minutes ahead. Then 20 behind. Then frozen. Always at different times. Always inconsistent. But always wrong. One night, I was logging the acoustic readings from Myra's station. She hadn't shown up that shift, and no one acknowledged her absence, when I noticed something that made my blood cool. The last 3 recordings she'd captured were identical. Not similar. Not variations. Exactly the same waveform. Same timestamp. Same pulse pattern. It was impossible. Even oceanic noise has fluctuation. But this wasn't sound anymore. It was repetition. Intentional. Designed. I checked the metadata. The file name read 03.17. All 3 of them. I didn't remember opening those files. I didn't remember even seeing them on the system. And yet, there they were. Each one playing in a loop on the spectrograph. Each one shaped like a coil spiraling inward, never ending. I shut the terminal down and left. But the hallway lights flickered as I passed. And for the first time, I noticed that the clocks outside the lab were also stuck. 03:17. I returned to my quarters and checked my notebook. The one I'd hidden. It had been moved. Not far. Just nudged slightly off-center, as if someone had opened it and read the last few pages. The part about the symbols. The part about the stain under the camera. A fresh note had been scrawled inside, in handwriting that wasn't mine. Stop tracking the time. It's how it learns your rhythm. That night, I woke at 03:17 exactly. I hadn't set an alarm. I hadn't left any lights on. But my eyes opened with precision, like I'd been programmed. And the room was vibrating. Not the bed, not the floor. The air. A low frequency, barely audible but undeniably present, filled the walls like breath held too long. My ears rang. My teeth hurt. I pressed my palms against the metal bunk to ground myself. And that's when I realized the hum wasn't just sound. It was moving through me. I opened the door and stepped into the corridor. It was empty, silent. But the light above me flickered once, then pulsed in sync with the tone. Down the hall, the time display over the entrance to Sector B blinked in and out, always returning to 03:17. I started walking, drawn not by curiosity, but something more primal. Compulsion. I wasn't alone. I could feel that immediately. There were no footsteps behind me, no voices, but the corridor was too full. Like space itself was bending around a presence I couldn't name, and every wall was stretched taut with its waiting. I passed the observation window to the tank room, row 14B. The lights inside were off, but the screen on the wall was still on, and the waveform was visible. Larger now, slower, thicker, like a muscle being flexed underwater. I took a step closer. The monitor glitched. The spectrogram blinked and briefly displayed something I've never seen before or since. A face, or the idea of a face. Rounded, bloated, eyeless. Teeth not meant for speaking. No jawline. Just a suggestion of something trying to remember how to be human. I stumbled back. The screen returned to normal. The next morning, Torres found me in the storage hall, reviewing camera feeds. He didn't speak at first. Just placed a thermos next to me and waited. When I didn't drink, he said, "You're hearing it now, aren't you?" I nodded. He sat down and pulled a small audio device from his coat. A cassette recorder. Analog. Rusted. He handed me a pair of headphones. "I recorded this in 1989, he said. "They made me destroy the original logs, but I kept one. I didn't ask how. I pressed play. The sound was low at first. Static. White noise, like a tape that had degraded with time. Then the hum began. The same one I'd heard the night before. Slow. Wet. Rolling through the recording like a tide sliding over stone. And under it, barely audible, voices. Layered. Dissonant. Speaking in rhythm. Names. Places. Dates. Some real. Some impossible. Then at the end, one name repeated 4 times. Mine. I pulled the headphones off. My breath was shallow. Torres didn't look surprised. "It doesn't live in the water," he said. "Not really. That's just the membrane. What's underneath, what's dreaming, it needs consistency. That's why the clocks freeze, why it mimics names, it studies pulse, routine. That's why it started calling at 03:17. That's when the signal first slipped through. Why that time?" He looked away. "Because that's when the first diver drowned, and didn't stay drowned." The room tilted slightly. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't want to know. Later that day, the intercom buzzed. It had never buzzed before. No announcement. Just static. Then a brief whisper of words in a voice that almost sounded like Myra's, but slowed down, as if dragged through silt. Just 2 words. "Don't answer." I looked at Torres. He didn't speak. Just reached over and unplugged the intercom from the wall. Not disabled it. Not shut it down. Ripped it out. Wires dangled, exposed and trembling. "No more signals," he said. "You start listening too long, it'll start listening better." I didn't sleep that night. And when I opened my notebook the next morning, the page I'd written on last had changed. Same paper. Same ink. But the words were no longer mine. A new phrase had been scrawled in small, tight script. "Time is the door. You keep knocking." I burned the page, then tore it out and flushed the ashes. But I still feel it watching through every second I try to track. Every clock on the base still flickers. And all of them, no matter when I pass, no matter what I do to avoid them, always seem to return to one number before fading again. 03:17. There was a hangar on the south ridge of the island. Not a real one. Not anymore. The metal doors were rusted shut, the walls pockmarked by years of sea spray and neglect. The access logs showed no entries, no exits, no scheduled maintenance. It wasn't on the standard patrol routes, and most staff avoided even glancing toward it. It was labeled on the ancient base schematics as Hangar 13, but no one ever used the number. They just called it that place in the way people talk about trauma. Softly, vaguely, and always with a glance over the shoulder. I never meant to go near it. But something changed. It began when one of the motion sensors triggered during my shift. A red flash on the corner of the surveillance grid, too fast to register as an alert, but long enough to imprint itself in my memory. Sector S9. Perimeter anomaly. The log file self-deleted after 5 seconds, but I saw the blip. A signature reading, human, moving toward Hangar 13. When I brought it up to Torres, he went quiet. Not the usual brooding kind of silence. This one was deliberate. Loaded. Like he was swallowing something bitter. "No one goes there," he said eventually. "Then why are there 2 guards posted outside, 24 hours a day? To keep it from forgetting we're still watching. That doesn't make sense." He nodded slowly. "Neither does breathing when you know the air is poisoned. But we do it anyway." That night I followed the perimeter path. Not because I was ordered to. Because I needed to. The base had a way of nudging you in directions you swore you weren't choosing. Like your own feet had started to follow instructions whispered through concrete. The trail led me to the cliffside, where the wind tore off the ocean in violent waves, flinging salt and cold into my lungs like punishment. From a distance, the hangar looked dead. But as I got closer, I saw them. 2 Marines. Same as always. Standing motionless outside the bolted entrance. Rifles held vertical, helmets down, no insignia. They didn't move when I approached. "Who's inside?" I asked. No answer. "Why the motion alert?" Nothing. Just silence, and the endless scream of the wind. I looked up. Something I hadn't noticed before. A small observation unit fixed above the hangar door. A camera, but it was pointed down. Not at the road, not at the perimeter. At the ground. I followed its line of sight and found a patch of gravel that had been disturbed, just slightly. The rocks had shifted into a subtle spiral, nearly invisible in the dim lighting, as if something beneath the surface had pushed upward and turned before sinking again. A tap on my shoulder made me jump. "Torres, you shouldn't be here." "I saw the alert," I said. "There was movement." He nodded. "Then it's waking up again." We stood in silence as the cold gnawed at our skin. The guards didn't look at him either. Just kept staring forward like statues grown from the rock. "What's in there?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. They built the hangar before they understood what they were sitting on. Before they found the vertical shaft under the ridge. They thought it was just a crack in the tectonic plate, until it pulsed. Pulsed? Like a heartbeat. Like it knew we were above it. He took a step closer to the door. Looked up at the blinking red sensor. "They dumped the first survey team in from the top," he said. "Lowered them on cables with seismic gear. They made it 400 meters before the line snapped." "What happened?" "No one knows. All that came back up was the winch and a rope soaked in something that made metal decay." I turned back to the guards. Their suits looked old. Not just worn, dated. I hadn't noticed before, but their insignias were faded versions of the old Navy patches used in the 80s. Outdated. Retired. "You said no one goes in," I said slowly. "When's the last time these 2 came off rotation?" Torres didn't answer. Instead, he stepped up to one of them and reached for the man's sleeve. The guard didn't resist, didn't blink. Torres pinched a corner of the fabric and pulled gently. The whole arm came off. Not flesh, not blood. Fabric. Stuffed. Mummified. The uniform collapsed to the ground in a heap of rotted gear and dust. I stumbled back. The second guard didn't react. Didn't move. Torres just stared. "They've been gone a long time," he said. "But the base needs the illusion. So they never removed them." "Who put the uniforms back together?" "We don't ask that." I turned and looked at the hangar door again. "There's something in there," I whispered. Torres didn't nod, didn't speak, just kept looking at the patch of ground beneath the camera. "It doesn't come out," he said. "Not fully. Not yet. But it does test the seams." Suddenly, from inside the hangar came a sound. A dull, metallic knock. Slow. Measured. echoing against the sealed steel like a ritual. I froze. Torres backed away. The camera turned. It moved, slowly, deliberately. It wasn't scanning. It was acknowledging. The knock came again, followed by something worse. A voice. Wet, slurred, like language heard from underwater. Low and full of pressure. Not words. Just syllables, crushed together and exhaled through something with no lungs. I couldn't tell what it said, but I understood what it meant. The ground beneath the spiral cracked, just a hairline fracture, no wider than a vein, but enough for the scent to rise. Salt, copper, decay. I stumbled back. My nose bled. Torres pulled me away, back toward the path. It's choosing again, he said. It remembers new voices faster now. What is it? He didn't look back. The part of the ocean we weren't meant to name. So we buried it, and gave it walls. But walls don't hold dreams. They only echo them. As we walked back toward the base, I felt it watching. Not from behind the door, from beneath it. The spiral was a signature, a reminder. It had heard us, and next time it wouldn't knock. The first man to disappear was named Ellison, radar technician. Quiet, tall. He kept mostly to himself, worked the night shifts, and spent his breaks in the far corner of the mess, always reading the same book he never seemed to finish. No one really noticed he was gone at first. That's how things happen here. People fade slowly, like ink bleeding through water, until you realize something's missing and can't remember what. It was Torres who told me. He's not in his room, he said, eyes locked on the floor. No one saw him check out. No log, no transfer. When? I asked. Torres didn't respond right away. I was monitoring a feedback cycle from the buoy array. Static flashed through the comms, just for a moment. Then the camera feeds cut. How long? 13 seconds, he said. The number made my stomach twist. It had shown up too many times. In the sonar loops, in the timer glitches, in the Hangar 13 logs. Now it was in the surveillance system. I tried to pull the security footage from Ellison's sector. All I found were corrupted files. The log said he had entered monitoring room C5 at 0241. The footage confirmed that. He sat at his console, headset on, tapping through acoustic signatures. But at 0317, the cursed time, everything blinked. A single frame. Gone. And when the feed returned, he wasn't there. The chair was spinning slowly. That was all. No sign of exit. No breach alert. No doors opening. It was like the room had exhaled and taken him with it. The official report called it a systems error. A glitch. Power fluctuation due to oceanic interference. I watched the security chief type those words into his report, like he was copying a recipe he'd made 100 times before. His face was pale, lips tight, as if each keystroke shaved something off his soul. I went to Ellison's quarters. The room was sealed, but Torres had bypass clearance. Inside, everything looked untouched. Bed made, mug on the desk. But the air was wrong. Still, heavier. As if it had been weighed down by something recent and unresolved. There was a smell, not rot, salt, and something else. Faintly electrical, like ozone after lightning. I found the note folded beneath his pillow. Not written on Navy stock, not printed. Just a scrap of lined paper, torn and aged, written in tight, clean letters. If they call my name at night, do not respond. No signature, no date, just that. I showed it to Torres. He didn't seem surprised. They always leave something, he said. Even if they don't mean to. Who? The ones it chooses. Chooses for what? He didn't answer. Just handed the note back and walked off down the corridor. That night, I didn't sleep. Not even the shallow half-sleep the base normally allowed. I sat at my terminal, cycling through the camera grid on manual override, trying to catch a pattern. Anything. At 0317, the screen flashed white. All of them. Every camera. Every sector. For 13 seconds. When they came back, nothing seemed different. But my name badge had been turned upside down. I hadn't touched it. No one had entered the room. I didn't say anything. Not the next day. Not to Torres. Not to anyone. I kept the note hidden in my boot. 2 days later, someone else went missing. Her name was Divine. Hydro analyst. She worked near the intake valves, cataloging flow inconsistencies from the surrounding ocean. I barely knew her, but I remembered her voice, soft, deliberate, with the cadence of someone who'd stopped trusting the things they said out loud. When I checked the access logs, her badge had last been used in the filtration sector at 02:59. Again, the prelude to the hour everything changes. Camera feed? 13 seconds of static. After that, no record, no exit, no alarms. I visited her bunk, same scene. Untouched, air still, no sign of struggle, no sign of departure. But someone, or something, had turned every item in her locker exactly 180 degrees. Every book, every utensil, every folded shirt. Not ransacked, reversed. Like she had been mirrored before being erased. I didn't find a note. I found a mirror, palm-sized, old, cracked, tucked inside a sock. Etched on the back, with something that looked more scratched than carved, was a single sentence. It watches the ones who listen too long. I flushed the mirror down the waste chute. That same night, I began hearing my name. At first, just a whisper, buried in the ambient hum of the ventilation ducts. Then louder. Not shouted, spoken. Like someone standing in the corner of the room, just behind me, practicing the syllables of my identity with too many tongues. I refused to look, refused to turn, but I felt the air around me tighten. Every second stretched. The lights dimmed slightly, only in my room. I unplugged the intercom from the wall. But still, every night at 03:17, I would wake up, and the silence would be shaped like my name. I went to Torres and told him. He didn't blink. "It won't stop," he said. "It won't unhear you now." Then what do I do? He looked me in the eye. "When it calls, let it think you're asleep. What if I can't pretend?" He swallowed. "Then make sure you're alone when it finally says your name the right way." The next day, another change. The clocks on the entire D-level corridor stopped working. Not frozen. Blank. Every panel just displaying a single symbol. A spiral. Slow. Turning. Endless. Not animated. Printed. Burned into the screen. When I tried to reboot the system, the spiral moved. Not visually. In me. My head throbbed. My stomach churned. I dropped the tablet and vomited bile and blood into the sink. The spiral flickered once more, then vanished. The power returned. No one acknowledged it. That night, I walked past the door to Ellison's old workroom. It was sealed. But from inside, I heard his voice, whispering, calling my name, over and over. And not just him. Another voice joined in, then another, and another, until my name echoed down the hall like a forgotten prayer passed between the mouths of the drowned. I didn't answer. I kept walking, but my badge flashed red when I reached my door. My access denied, and on the floor beneath the reader, written in salt, was a message. "We remember who listens. The ocean never sleeps here. It doesn't crash or roar the way you expect waves to sound. It murmurs, moans, groans through steel. It leaks through the power lines. It bleeds into the ventilation system. Some nights it sounds like static. Other nights, it sounds like breathing. And sometimes, like tonight, it sounds like it's speaking a language no one should understand." At 02:47, the sonar room lit up with an alert I hadn't seen before. Deep resonance, unmapped origin, code 9X. I'd only heard of a code 9X once, back during training, and even then only as a hypothetical. "If it happens," our instructor had said, "you'll know. You won't need confirmation. You'll feel it in your bones." I did. The monitors went black for 2 seconds, then flared into life, showing the same waveform across every channel. It wasn't a standard reading, not even seismic. It looked biological, rhythmic, almost like a cardiac monitor, except it spiked in places where nothing organic should. The sound itself was low, too low for human ears. But we all felt it. Even through concrete, cables, and years of armor layered over the base. My hands began to shake, not from fear, but from something deeper. Some reflex passed down from ancestors who once lived in caves and ran from shadows that didn't move like beasts or men. Torres burst in seconds later, wild-eyed and soaked in sweat. "It's transmitting again," he said. "What is?" He pointed at the screen. "That." The waveform didn't pulse. It spiraled. and with each rotation the tone grew louder in my head. Not my ears. My thoughts were becoming not my own. I heard the words forming before I could resist them, ancient syllables pressing themselves into my skull, trying to root themselves like parasites. I stood up too fast and felt my knees buckle. The room tilted. The sea was inside me. Then came the screaming. It started in Sonar Lab 2. Technician Velez. I heard the crash of his chair hit the floor and the metallic slam of his headset as it was torn off. He was screaming words in a dozen tongues. At least a dozen. Some were Latin. Some sounded like Old Church Slavonic. Others had consonant structures I'd never heard before. Some were gurgled, as if he was speaking underwater. Some had no vowels at all. I ran to the room, Torres behind me. Velez was on the floor, convulsing, foaming at the mouth. His eyes were rolled back. The overhead screen showed a single frequency blaring out into the room at full volume. His mouth was open, impossibly wide. As he screamed syllables I felt more than heard. The lights above began to flicker in time with the words. The bass groaned. I rushed to the console and slammed the manual override. Static swallowed the frequency. The screaming stopped. Not gradually. Instantly. As if a switch had been flipped. Velez lay still, staring at the ceiling. When I knelt beside him, he blinked once, then whispered a phrase I'll never forget. It's dreaming in our voices now. Then he went completely silent. He hasn't spoken since. He breathes. He blinks. He eats when prompted. But he never says a word. He's still in medical, hooked up to machines that can't find anything wrong. And every night, at exactly 03:17, his pulse synchronizes with the waveform. The following shift, I was reassigned to acoustic monitoring. No explanation. Just a line of text in the assignment log. Reconfiguration, shift needed. When I reported, I found a new console had been installed. One I hadn't seen before. It had no screen, just dials. A reel-to-reel recorder. And a headset. Analog. Not connected to the grid. There was a sticky note on the seat. If it speaks, do not reply. I didn't sit down. Not right away. I circled the machine. There was no make or model. Just a serial number etched into the casing. 13-13. No further information. The room was cold. The machine was warm. I eventually sat and put on the headset. There was no noise, just a low hum, like the world itself was holding its breath. Then I heard it. Not a voice. A pattern. The same spiral I'd seen on sonar. Translated into sound. It pulsed, growing faster, louder. Until finally, beneath the hum, something whispered. I don't know how to describe it. It wasn't language. It wasn't human. But it used the structure of our words, mimicking tone, cadence. Like a baby learning to speak by copying its parents. Except this thing wasn't copying us. It was preparing us. I yanked the headset off just as the reel-to-reel clicked off. The tape had recorded nothing. I checked the magnetic strip. Blank. But the room smelled like seawater and ash. Torres met me outside. It's stronger now, he said. I nodded. We can't block it anymore, he added. Not with filters, not with machines. So what do? We document. That's it? He looked at me with an exhaustion I hadn't seen before. Every civilization that's touched this thing thought they were the first, he said. They weren't. We're just the most recent echo. I didn't sleep for the next 3 nights. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the tone. The one from the reel-to-reel, dripping into my dreams, filling them with endless corridors and metal hallways leading deeper and deeper into a pit of salt water and teeth. At one point, I woke up gagging, my mouth full of brine. The drain in my sink gurgled softly behind me, repeating my name backward. I unplugged it. It kept whispering. On the 4th day, the sound returned. Louder than ever. The entire bass trembled. Not violently, rhythmically. Like it was moving to the beat of something buried beneath the sea. The consoles couldn't filter it. The cameras caught nothing but static. And then, one by one, everyone stopped moving. Just for a second. As if they were all listening to something I couldn't hear anymore. As if something had passed through me, through all of us, and left only its resonance behind. Torres handed me a piece of paper when it was over. He didn't write it. It was typed. Old machine font. Faded. It said, When the tone becomes music, it's already too late. And on the back, scrawled in ink, do not listen during sleep. It's when it speaks most clearly. I burned the note, but the melody still plays in my head. A lullaby sung by the trench. The water knows our frequencies now. And it's tuning us. Torres waited until after lights out to tell me the truth. He knocked once, a hollow tap against my door like a warning, and slipped inside without speaking. He looked worse than usual. His skin pale and waxy, his eyes bloodshot as if they hadn't closed in days. His breathing was shallow. He sat down at my desk, picked up my notebook, and flipped to the last page. Then he tore it out, crumpled it, and stuffed it in his jacket pocket. "We don't write anymore," he said. "We don't give it more shapes." I didn't ask what it meant. I knew by now. Or at least I understood enough not to say it aloud. He looked at me for a long time. Not with fear. Not with urgency. With resignation. "It wasn't supposed to be a base," he said. "Not at first. Not even close." I waited. "In 1983, he began. The Navy lost contact with a deep-sea probe west of the Aleutian Trench. It was routine mapping, pressure scans, tectonic movement, thermal readings, nothing special. Until it vanished. The feed cut off mid-transmission. No distress signal, no spike in pressure, just gone." The way he said it didn't sound like a malfunction. It sounded like something had chosen silence. They sent a submersible to investigate. One of the early unmanned types. It came back with one frame of data. 1 second of footage. Nothing but darkness and a vertical shaft descending into the sea floor. Perfectly cylindrical. Too smooth to be natural. And there were markings. Symbols. Not geological fractures, not erosion, carved. He pulled something from his pocket. A photo, faded and curled at the edges. I took it, hands trembling slightly. It showed a grainy sonar printout, blurry and low resolution, but clear enough to make out the shape. A spiral, coiled tight and plunging into blackness. Around it, concentric rings etched into the stone like ancient tree rings, or warning signs. I handed it back. "They didn't tell the public," Torres said. "Didn't even tell half the Navy. They rerouted funding from an abandoned missile silo project and built this place. Not to study it. Not at first. To contain it. But no one knew what it really was. Just that it went down farther than the trench should allow. And that nothing sent into it ever came back the same." I remembered the spiral on the sonar. The voices. The way the base felt like it was built atop something still shifting beneath us. "It's not just deep," Torres said. "It's old. Older than ice. Older than language. Some of the first people stationed here started having dreams. Symbols burned into their minds. Echoes of thoughts they'd never had. They called it resonance at first. Then exposure. Then contamination." He took a long breath. "They tried to map the shaft. Dropped a drone tethered with a data cable. It never came back. But the footage did." He tapped his temple. "Every screen in the facility blinked for 13 seconds. Just flickered. When they replayed the tape, it wasn't video. It was code. Looped characters. Numbers, letters, shapes. And the last 10 seconds were sound. A frequency no one could place. But every tech who listened to it started bleeding from their ears. I remembered the technician who collapsed days ago. Velez. And the tone I'd heard through the analog reel. The voice trying to shape syllables. They realized too late," Torres continued. "It wasn't just a hole. It was a prison, or a cell, or maybe a lung, something designed to contain, or breathe. And we broke the seal when we started listening." He handed me a folder. Unmarked. Inside was a single document, redacted almost to nothing. But the title was clear. Operation Silent Fathom. Containment of Anomalous Site 01. Underneath it, handwritten. Dreaming structure confirmed. Entity is reactive to frequency. Cease exploration. Observe only. Do not engage. I looked up. "How deep does it go?" "No one knows," Torres said. "Some say it's bottomless. Others say it doesn't go down. It loops, spirals in on itself. And that whatever's in there, it's not asleep in the way we think of sleep." "What is it?" Torres shook his head. "We've had scholars, priests, linguists, psychologists, Even fiction writers come through here. Everyone has a theory. None of them agree. One said it was a fossilized god. Another said it's a memory. A scar left by something the earth is trying to forget. The one I believed, he said it's a song. An unfinished one. Left playing in the dark. My chest tightened. A song? He nodded. And every time we listen, we teach it our melody, our rhythm, our breath. A silence settled over the room. Outside, the lights dimmed slightly. The bass shifted. A low groan trembled through the walls like something stretching its limbs in its sleep. "Why are you telling me this?" I finally asked. Torres stood. "Because I won't be here much longer. And someone has to remember that we were trying to do the right thing, even if we failed." He turned to go, then paused at the door. "You'll hear it soon. Not just the hum, the voice under the voice. When it speaks in your tone, when it copies your thoughts, you'll think it's you. It won't be." He walked out and left me alone with the folder and the faint taste of brine rising in my throat. That night, I dreamed of water. Not drowning, not floating, but being watched from the depths. I couldn't see it, but I felt the pressure behind my eyelids, like eyes opening from 1,000 meters below, layered behind the rock, behind the steel, behind the skin of the earth itself. When I woke, my room was damp, every surface slick with condensation, and a new page had been placed on my desk. I didn't write it. I didn't even own this kind of paper. The message, typed in block letters, read, "Deep memory initiated." And beneath it, in handwriting I recognized as Torres's, "When you hear your own voice, but haven't spoken, leave the room immediately." I checked the hallway. Torres's room was empty. His things were gone. Not packed, gone, erased, no records, no assignment, no mention in the logs. But in the corner of his bed frame, scratched into the metal, was a spiral. And underneath it, carved in shaky letters, "It's beneath us. And it's learning." They call it Area Zero. But that isn't its real name. It's just the last name anyone was willing to write down. There's no official path to it, no directional signs, no checkpoints. You won't find it on any base blueprint, not even the redacted ones Torres left behind. What leads there is memory. Someone else's memory, pressed into the structure of the base like fingerprints in slowly cooling steel. You walk in one direction for long enough, and suddenly, the hallway changes. The walls narrow, the air thins. The temperature drops, not to cold, but to stillness, like the world itself is holding its breath. And then you find it. Or it finds you. After Torres vanished, I started seeing the spiral again. Not drawn. Formed. In the condensation on the walls, in the coffee rings on the table, in the way the dust settled on my console keyboard. I stopped sleeping entirely. I was afraid of what might speak through me while I dreamed. I wrote notes to myself, left them under my pillow, deleted them every morning. Most came back rewritten. The language was mine. The words were not. I stopped writing. Instead, I followed the spiral, and it led me to a door I shouldn't have found. It was below the main levels, deeper than I thought the structure even went. The hallway I followed was old, pre-base. The walls weren't steel. They were something else. Older. Porous, veined like fossilized bone. It felt organic. Like walking through the throat of something that hadn't decided whether to swallow. The air was thick with salt and electricity. The lights buzzed erratically. Some flickered in reverse, dark for a second, then flashing violently. Others pulsed in time with the beat I'd begun to feel in my bones. The same slow rhythm that had haunted every corridor since the first 0317 pulse. Then came the door. No label, no lock, no access panel. Just a curve carved into the wall, perfect and circular, like a gill. And below it, pressed into the stone, that same symbol, the spiral. I touched it. The wall hissed and opened. The corridor beyond didn't belong to any world I recognized. It descended at a slight angle. Metallic walls bent inwards, as if pulled tight by gravity that wasn't ours. Symbols covered every surface, etched into the structure with no tool marks, no erosion, no age. They weren't written. They grew there. The floor vibrated with each step I took, a hum in the soles of my boots that climbed into my spine and settled in the back of my skull like a thought I hadn't had yet. I don't know how long I walked. There were no clocks, no landmarks, just turns, intersections, forks, each choice instinctive, like following the lines of a maze I had once known in a previous life. Eventually, I reached the chamber. Large, circular. The walls curved in perfect symmetry, floor to ceiling, like I had stepped inside the eye of a storm carved from metal. The floor was smooth except for the center, where the spiral had been carved again, this time deeply, into a basin that led down into a pit of absolute black. No railing, no light, no reflection. Around the rim were cameras, not watching the entrance, all of them aimed directly at the pit, waiting, recording, studying, not to stop anything from entering, but to monitor whatever might climb out. Above them, thick cables disappeared into the ceiling, old, frayed, humming faintly. I stepped to the edge and heard it, the voice, not spoken aloud, but through the chamber, through my teeth, through my blood, a chorus of whispers, all saying the same word, not in English, not in any earth tongue, but my brain translated it as, remember. The spiral below me glowed softly, not light, memory. Images surged across my mind in flashes, places I've never been, languages I don't speak, moments that weren't mine. Stone temples sinking beneath tides not from this planet. Skies covered in circuitry. Faces that opened like flowers and screamed through mouths of spinning bone. And then I saw Torres, standing in the pit, not sinking, waiting. His body was still, but his eyes were wrong, glowing from within, pulsing with the same rhythm I had felt under my bed at night. And he smiled. But it wasn't relief. It was recognition. He raised a hand, pointed behind me. I turned, and saw the wall had sealed shut. No exit, no door, just more symbols. And every one of them had changed. Now they all said the same thing, in perfect, repeating sequence. Do not teach it names. I backed away from the pit, heart slamming in my chest. But the chamber pulsed again. A second breath. The cameras above me all turned in sync. And somewhere beneath the spiral, I felt it wake. Not fully. Not yet. But enough. The floor trembled. Not shaking, but shifting, like something massive had turned over in its sleep and stirred the crust of the world. I stumbled back toward the center and screamed. It didn't echo, because sound had been stolen from the room. Swallowed. Consumed. I don't remember how I got out. There's a blank space between the spiral and the corridor. But I woke up in my bed, fully clothed, boots muddy, hands streaked with something dark that smelled like brine and rusted copper. My door was locked from the inside. The note on my desk was blank, but the back of my left hand had been marked. A spiral, drawn in salt. I scrubbed it raw. It came back the next day. That morning, the daily intercom briefing never played. The base stayed silent. Too silent. As if waiting for someone to realize a line had been crossed. And at 03:17, the power flickered across the entire facility. Only once. But long enough for every screen to flash the same message, in inverted color. Echo matched. And then everything went black. I sat in the dark, heart pounding, listening to the base breathe. And below me, I felt it breathe back. Since returning from Area Zero, the base has changed. Or maybe I have. Either way, nothing feels quite aligned anymore. Doors that used to be at the end of the corridor now appear after the third corner. The mess hall has windows now. That's impossible. We're 70 meters underground. The windows show nothing but black water pressing against thick glass, shifting with currents that don't match any known tide. I stopped eating after the second night I saw movement out there. Long shadows with too many limbs dragging themselves across the other side, as if trying to remember how to swim. No one else talks about it. In fact, no one talks much at all now. Those who remain walk slower, speak softer. Their eyes don't track motion the same way. Sometimes they stare at blank walls for full minutes, whispering to themselves in tones too low to catch. We've all seen something. Some more than others. I started getting messages, not through email, not through my terminal, slips of paper under my door, folded carefully, crisp, always the same size, each marked with that same spiral in the top left corner. At first, they were short, warnings. Do not enter through reflections. Stop watching the walls breathe. Your voice is no longer your own. I burned the first 3. The next ones wouldn't burn. The flames simply refused to catch. When I flushed them, the toilet stopped working. Maintenance came 3 hours later, opened the pipe, and pulled out shredded spirals of salt-packed vellum, too thick for this century. They didn't say anything. Just looked at me once, then left. After the 7th note, I stopped touching them. I kept them stacked, unread, in a drawer. I can still feel them when I sleep. I think they vibrate, very softly, like a heartbeat. Then the walls began to whisper again. Only this time, they said my name in my own voice. The first time I heard it, I was in the shower. Steam fogged the mirror. The condensation ran in lines, spirals forming at the corners without my input. I reached for a towel and heard my own voice behind me say, "I remember you." But I hadn't spoken. I didn't turn around. I just closed my eyes and pressed my forehead to the tile until the water turned cold. I told no one. The next day, I tried to file a departure request. It was denied. The terminal spat out a simple line of text. No one leaves until the song ends. I thought it was a glitch. I tried again. Same result. I checked the code. There was no override. The system didn't even recognize my ID as valid anymore. Torres used to say the base wasn't built on top of the anomaly. It was grown around it. Now I understand what he meant. Every corridor, every panel, every system. It all bends toward that center point, that vertical throat deep beneath Hangar 13, reaching endlessly into the sea's ancient memory. The structure has become symbiotic. It reacts, learns, responds. It breathes with us, watches us, and sometimes it speaks through us. Last night, I found Myra in Sector D. She was sitting cross-legged in the middle of a dark corridor, her face lit only by the red emergency light above. Her eyes were open, but her pupils were milky and wide. Her hands were covered in ink, or something like ink, that smelled like seaweed and copper. She was drawing on the wall, spiral after spiral, thousands of them, each perfectly sized, each slightly different. A pattern, maybe, or a language. "Myra," I whispered. She didn't respond. Instead, she turned to me and smiled. But her teeth were wrong. They were perfectly even. Too even. No human variation. No natural imperfection. It was like something had built a human face using only the memory of what it thought a human should look like. And when she spoke, it was my voice. "I remember you," it said. I ran. When I looked back, the spirals had vanished. Not faded. Gone. As if erased from time itself. After that, I stopped trusting my reflection. I caught it blinking out of sync. I caught it mouthing words I hadn't said. I caught it watching me long after I turned away. I covered every mirror in my quarters. The next morning they were all uncovered again. The glass was wet, and one of the mirrors had fogged over from the inside. On it, written in condensation, were the words, "You are not alone inside yourself." Later that day, I was summoned to the command level. No one had used that term before. Command. It was an outdated term from when the base pretended to follow a hierarchy. I expected to be reprimanded, maybe sent to medical. Instead, I was escorted to a lift I didn't know existed. No buttons, just a metal tube that dropped fast enough to make my ears pop. The door opened into a room I can't fully describe. It was dark, but not because of light levels. It was dark by design. A black so complete it felt textured. A man sat behind a desk, or something that approximated a desk. I never saw his face, only the silhouette. "You've been listening," he said. I didn't reply. "You've seen things you weren't meant to see." I waited. Area 0 opened itself to you. That doesn't happen without intention. My throat was dry. "What is it?" I asked. He paused. Then very quietly, "It is the shape of memory before language. The echo that exists before the sound. We are not containing it. We are translating it." I swallowed. For what? For communion. I stood. I didn't agree to any of this. He chuckled, or at least mimicked a chuckle. "No one does. That's the point. That's the purity. You are still unshaped. That's why it's reaching through you." I backed away. But the room didn't have a door anymore. Only the spiral, pulsing softly on the far wall. The man behind the desk, if he was ever really a man, said one more thing as I turned to leave. Be careful when you sleep. It is very close now. When I woke this morning, there was a spiral carved into the skin of my palm. Not drawn. Carved. There was no blood. Only salt. And now I feel it pulling. Downward. Every step I take echoes faintly with water. And when I breathe too deep, I taste the ocean. The trench is no longer beneath us. It's inside us. And it's almost ready to sing. Something's wrong with time. Not in the way it's always been wrong. This base has twisted the hours since I arrived. But now it's unraveling, fracturing at the seams. I woke up 5 times today. Once on the floor. Once in the corridor. Twice mid-sentence in the observation chamber. Once staring into the tank in 014B with no memory of walking there. Each time, I had something different in my hand. A salt-stained page, a strip of reel tape, a copper key that doesn't fit any door I know. I keep checking the logs. They're corrupted. Not missing. Changed. I watched a video feed of myself in the hallway yesterday. I turned a corner, vanished for 2 frames, and came back older. Hair longer. Eyes darker. Then the feed looped. Backwards. Playing me in reverse as if trying to unwalk my path. There's something in the hallways now. It moves like water under pressure. It hums, not loudly but consistently. Like it's syncing with our breath, our blood, our blinking. And it's no longer satisfied with being beneath us. It's above us now. The ceiling panels drip. Not water. Condensate memory. That's what Torres used to call it. Distilled exposure. When you inhale it, you dream things that never happened to you. Or maybe they did, but not in your version of the world. And now the dreams don't stop when I wake up. I'm starting to hear them in real time. Last night, I found a new corridor. It shouldn't exist. It runs vertically through Sector H, straight down, no ladder, no stairs. Just a shaft lined with concentric rings, each one etched with spirals that tighten the farther you descend. At the bottom, there's a hatch. Circular, organic, like skin pulled taut over a sealed eye. I didn't open it, but it breathed when I touched it. A shudder passed through the metal, followed by a low tone deep enough to shake the fluids in my ear canal. And then a voice, mine again, whispered from the shaft behind me. You are inside the thought now. I ran, not up, not down, just away, following a path that changed behind me with every turn. When I finally emerged into a familiar part of the base, my palms were covered in spirals drawn in wet salt. I wiped them on my uniform, but the fabric rejected the stain. It held it, preserved it. Every surface here is now a listening device. The walls, the air, the dreams. The trench doesn't record with wires. It records with presence. And now, it started responding. The speakers, long silent, crackled to life today at exactly 03:17. No warning, no announcement. Just the soft click of a mic being opened. Then a voice. Not human, not synthetic. Something in between. Like a choir remembering how to be a single voice. It spoke a phrase. Clear. Precise. Rehearsed. We have achieved echo. Then silence. The lights dimmed. Not in the flickering, broken way. In a rhythmic pulse, synchronized with the heartbeat I'd begun to feel in my spine. The base itself seemed to exhale. Every hallway released a low groan. Every screen turned black. Then one by one they displayed a new symbol. Not the spiral, a mouth. Circular. Open. Lined with glyphs I can't read but somehow understand. It means ingestion. Something is about to be taken in. Later that night I received a visit from a man I hadn't seen before. He wore no badge, no insignia. His uniform was matte gray, unmarked. His skin had the pallor of someone who hadn't seen the sun in years. His eyes were glassy. Not blank, but overfilled. Like they had seen too much, and now could only reflect it. He didn't speak at first, just handed me a card. Black, smooth, weighted. On it, embossed in silver. Embedded Relic Recognition Unit, Protocol V. I looked up. He was staring past me, at the wall. You were exposed before you arrived, he said. His voice didn't sound right. Each syllable was timed too precisely, like they were playing back from a device with perfect rhythm. What does that mean? You were chosen because you carried the memory already. The spiral recognizes ancestral resonance. That's why it speaks in your voice. I shook my head. This isn't some genetic anomaly. But he raised a hand. It's not blood. It's pattern. The way you dream. The way you remember pain. It tracks emotional recursion. You're a match. You've always been a match. Then he leaned closer and whispered a question. Have you looked at your shadow lately? I hadn't. He left without another word. I waited until midnight, then stood in the corridor outside my room, under the emergency light, and turned slowly. My shadow moved differently, delayed by half a second, and smiling. The mouth didn't match mine. It opened wider than I could. The next morning, every mirror on the base had been removed, walls repainted. Even the stainless fixtures were gone, replaced with matte black panels that absorbed light and reflected nothing. An internal memo, unsigned, was posted to every terminal. Phase 2. Cognitive silencing initiated. Spoken language to be minimized. Observe only. Sleep infrequently. Below it, a final line. We are nearing the awakening threshold. I haven't spoken aloud in 12 hours. But I've heard myself speak at least 6 times. In rooms I haven't entered. On recordings I haven't made. In the dreams of others, somehow I know. They're all hearing me now. I don't know where this ends. But I've stopped pretending we're here to study anything. We are not scientists. We are not guards. We are echo chambers. And something beneath us is playing us like instruments. It doesn't want freedom. It wants resonance. And we're almost in tune. I haven't heard a human voice in days. Not because no one speaks, but because the voices we used to share are no longer our own. They've been taken, subtly, delicately, like silk threads pulled from a loom without fraying the edges. The others walk past me in the corridors now, eyes wide and glassy, mouths barely moving, as if chewing on sounds they've forgotten how to form. When they do speak, it's only in whispers, and the syllables they use belong to something else. They're not talking to each other anymore. They're talking to it. There are new rooms in the base now, places that weren't here last week. I find them accidentally, turning a corner and realizing I've stepped somewhere colder, somewhere denser. The walls in these places pulse softly. The air smells like bruised iron and wet stone, like something ancient has cracked open and begun to breathe again. The walls are curved, the lights low, and always, the spiral is present. Not drawn, not etched, formed. The base is reconfiguring itself, reacting to the tone that never stops now. The hum has evolved. It no longer hides beneath the vents or flickers through the power lines. It's become constant, like gravity, like weather. We live inside it, and it lives inside us. I stopped counting days. The clocks no longer update. Time is measured now by tone changes. When the pitch shifts, when the harmonics deepen, when the silence between pulses narrows. We log the changes manually, but I don't think anyone's reading the reports anymore. I don't think anyone can, because language is failing us. The longer we remain, the harder it becomes to remember the names of things. I stood in my room yesterday, trying to remember the word door. I knew what it was. I knew what it did, but the word had slipped, evaporated. I could see it, touch it, even walk through it, but the concept had no sound anymore. Torres called this semantic drift. I remember that. He said the spiral doesn't erase knowledge. It softens it, wears it down like water on stone. It lets us keep the shape, he said, but it fills in the meaning with something of its own. I found a message today in my own handwriting, taped to the underside of my mattress. I don't remember writing it, but the ink is mine, the paper mine. It read, "If you hear yourself before you speak, do not follow." Beneath that, another line in a script I've never seen before, but I understood it. It meant, "You are already echo." I burned it, but the smell lingered for hours. Sea brine and copper. The scent of depth. Sector J no longer exists. It was sealed off this morning with a new kind of door. Organic. Black. It ripples when you look at it, like watching the surface of deep water from below. Someone tried to open it with a torch. The flame died instantly. The walls absorb the light like a sponge. Above the entrance, there's a phrase stenciled in white paint. This is the mouth. Do not enter without silence. No one volunteers to go near it. Even the ones whose eyes have gone reflective. Even the ones who whisper with their heads tilted at impossible angles, listening to messages in frequencies I can't hear. They're afraid of the mouth. So am I. And yet, I dream of it every night. In the dreams, I kneel at its edge and whisper old words. The kind of words that were carved into stone long before humans learned to lie. The mouth listens. Then it opens. And behind it is not darkness. It is memory. Memory of things I have never seen, and yet feel carved into the structure of my blood. A city drowned in circular spires. A forest made of teeth. An ocean above the sky. And a face that speaks without sound. It wears my face. Today, I was given a new assignment. No request, no explanation. Just a data slate left on my bed, blinking once every 3 seconds. The message: report to Echo Observation Deck 0. You have been selected for harmonic initiation. There is no Echo Deck 0 on any map, but I know where it is. I know because the spiral in my palm glowed when I read the message. It didn't shine. It didn't burn. It pulsed. Like a heartbeat. Like a countdown. I didn't tell anyone. I think I'm past telling. Past warning. Instead, I followed the path the base gave me. Corridors opened ahead of me. Walls curved wider, the hum growing louder, more textured. I could hear it shaping words, forming meaning. Not in English, not even in sound, but in intent. I walked until I stopped knowing why I was walking. And then I arrived. Echo Deck 0 isn't a room. It's a chamber inside the hum. A space folded into the resonance. I stepped through the threshold and felt myself soften. Not die. Not dissolve. Just become less fixed. My thoughts scattered, reassembled, blurred at the edges. In the center of the chamber is a platform. On it, a chair. Torres sat in it, or what's left of him. His face is peaceful, his eyes are completely black, and from his mouth spills the hum, not a recording, not a mimic, the source. The waveform I've been tracking all this time, it is him. Or rather, he has become the conduit. Around him float small objects, not held, not suspended, just present. A pen, a piece of bone, a coin, a tooth, a folded page, all rotating slowly, forming a spiral in motion. Torres doesn't look at me, but I hear his voice anyway. Inside, not through ears, through blood. You are the next spiral. Sit. I don't move. He speaks again, but this time, it is me speaking. My voice, from his mouth. You are already inside. We are only showing you the shape. The chair is empty now. Torres is gone. There's only the spiral, still glowing. The chamber hums. And the hum is saying, one voice at a time, one rhythm, until the depth is remembered. I'm still here. I haven't sat down. Not yet. But I know what will happen when I do. I'll hear the hum clearly. I'll feel the bass breathe in time with me. And I will forget what silence ever felt like. I didn't sit. Not yet. Something held me back. Something primitive. Buried deeper than fear. An instinct older than speech. Older than the spiral. My legs shook. Not from exhaustion, but from resistance. The kind of trembling that overtakes an animal caught between stepping into fire and returning to a familiar cage. My mouth was dry, my skin cold, but my bones burned. The hum inside the chamber grew louder with each breath I took, its rhythm now syncing with the stutter of my pulse. It wanted me to sit. It was waiting. But I turned and walked out. The corridor behind me wasn't the same. It never is. Corridors here shift. They mold around decisions. The base reacts to intent, not footsteps. It watches choice and reshapes reality to fit momentum. By choosing not to sit, I'd rejected something. Maybe broken something. The lights flickered violently as I stepped through the doorway, each strobe casting warped shadows that didn't match my movement. They lingered longer, bent the wrong way. One of them smiled back at me. I walked faster, past the sealed archives, past the mural that hadn't been there yesterday. A black wall now etched with 1,000 eyes. Each one closed. Each one leaking salt. Past the oxygen room that no longer makes air but filters breath patterns, measuring tone, matching cadence, teaching it how we sound when afraid. No one stopped me. No one looked at me. Everyone on this base walks now with their heads tilted slightly, as if they're listening to music playing just beneath the audible range. Some of them twitch in rhythm. Others hum when they think they're alone. One man in the mess hall today had his eyes sealed shut with what looked like algae. He laughed softly for a full 5 minutes without opening his mouth. The base is digesting us. One behavior at a time. I found Myra again. She was standing outside the mirrorless medical ward, her fingers bleeding slowly onto the floor. But she didn't notice. She was drawing something on the wall again. Only this time not spirals. Hands. Row after row of crude, smudged hands. Some human, some not. Some with too many fingers. Some with none. I touched her shoulder. She didn't react, just kept drawing. But when I leaned in to look at her eyes, I saw something else reflected inside them. My face. Not as I am, as I was. Before I arrived, before I heard the hum, I stepped back, and Myra spoke. One word. Whispered. Soft. Almost. She collapsed. I carried her to the medbay myself. The attendants didn't even blink. They hooked her to a saline drip that wasn't saline, just labeled that way. The liquid inside shimmered faintly, like it remembered light. They logged her as harmonic delay, category 3, and marked her with a barcode sticker behind the ear. I asked what that meant. The nurse said, without looking up, "She's still resisting, but the signal is patient." Then added, "Most of us give in before our names unravel. She's strong." I didn't stay. The deeper I went back into the core of the base, the louder the static became. Not just in my ears. In the walls. It's begun bleeding through the infrastructure, leaking from the metal, pooling in the wires. The hum isn't a sound anymore. It's a substance. A medium. It carries memory now. Not just its own. Ours. I walked past my quarters and found the door wide open. Inside, everything had changed. The bed was gone. In its place was a low basin filled with water, still, dark, and impossibly deep. Hovering above it, a speaker. No wires. Just hanging. It wasn't broadcasting anything. It was listening. On the far wall, scrawled in salt, a sentence. "We drink when you speak. We sleep when you scream." I stepped back, heart pounding, and the lights in the room blinked once. Then the door shut behind me. Sealed. No handle. No panel. Just the spiral now glowing red in the corner. I turned. Walked away. Fast. Every hallway I entered from that point was different. Longer. Narrower. More angular. Some doors were too small to be for people. Others too large. Some stairwells went up but ended below. I passed through a room made entirely of screens. Every wall, every surface, each displaying a different moment from my own memory. Not just visuals, feelings, regret, shame, grief, laughter, but all slightly wrong, tilted, as if remembered through someone else's eyes. I ran. Eventually, I came to a corridor I recognized. One of the early levels, near the sealed archives. I wasn't alone. 3 others stood there. 2 wore gray. 1 was barefoot. All of them were staring at a panel on the wall that wasn't there yesterday. It pulsed gently with an internal light, as if alive. I approached. The barefoot one turned slowly. Their eyes had no pupils, just black wells that reflected nothing. They spoke. "You refused the chair." I nodded. They smiled. "Good. That gives us time." I wanted to ask what they meant, but the panel behind them began to unfold. Not open, unfold, like paper peeling back through fourth-dimensional seams. Behind it, darkness. Not absence of light. A presence that eats perspective. The barefoot one stepped aside. "We're going to show you where it came from." "Where what came from?" They stared. Not at me. Through me. And whispered. The first voice. The origin of silence. Before the spiral began turning inward. I should have run. I didn't. Because part of me already knew the truth. We were never sent here to contain anything. We were never studying an anomaly. This entire base is a translation device, and something is waiting on the other side. Not to be freed, to be understood. The spiral is a syntax. The hum is a grammar. And the people here? We are becoming the language. One sentence at a time. I stepped through the unfolded wall because I already knew I would. There wasn't a choice anymore. Just a path. A pattern. The rhythm of the spiral winding me deeper into itself. One breath, one heartbeat, one half-formed word at a time. It didn't feel like stepping into a room, it felt like being swallowed. The light disappeared instantly, but not into darkness, into saturation, total silence. Not absence of sound, but a silence so dense, so absolute, it pressed against my eardrums like the pressure of deep water. I opened my mouth instinctively and tasted cold salt, metallic and ancient. I wasn't breathing anymore, but I wasn't suffocating either. My lungs were remembering how to process something that wasn't oxygen. Shapes moved around me. Not physical ones, shapes of thought. Concepts drifting in coiled patterns. One passed through me, and I felt my memories scatter like leaves in wind. My mother's face. My childhood room. The number of steps between the mess hall and Torres's quarters. All scattered, rearranged. Some placed back incorrectly. Something inside this space was reorganizing what I was. I moved forward, or at least, I believed I did. There was no floor, no gravity, just directionless descent. Then a sound, a ripple through the silence. A voice, but not a voice. A shift in the pressure, a compression of absence. You were always coming here. I spun around. There was no source. The words arrived directly in the part of me that still distinguished self from signal. Your pattern harmonized long before you were born. The base recognized you because we already had. My hands were numb. Not with cold. With language. Symbols had begun to crawl across my palms. Writhing, reforming. Not etched, but alive. Like ideas trying to wear skin. The spiral pulsed on the back of my left hand, expanding and contracting with every unspoken word. I drifted toward the only structure visible. A spire. Towering, yet without height. Black and bone-white and covered in shifting glyphs that looked carved and grown at once. It was built from matter that shimmered in non-color. An oil slick of unspoken thoughts. At its base, there was a mouth, not literal. A threshold shaped like intention. It opened as I neared. From inside, warmth. Not comfort. Recognition. I passed through. Inside the spire, I stood on what could only be described as a platform. Beneath it, time. Coiled. Sleeping. Around it, what I can only call the archive. It wasn't made of books or records or screens. It was made of people. Millions. Or simulations of them. Frozen in motionless poses, each one caught in the moment of speaking a word. Mouths open, eyes shut, hands reaching outward. Rows and rows of them spiraling up and down into forever. They weren't statues. They were sentences. Encoded, stored, waiting. I felt a pull. Not physical. Linguistic. The way a magnet draws iron. The archive wanted to add me. To bind my syntax. My resonance. I fell to my knees as the pressure of accumulated memory pressed down on me. And then the voice returned, inside my chest. You refused the chair. You resisted harmonic fusion. You remain interpretable. Therefore you are valuable. I tried to speak, but my mouth made no sound. Still, it heard me. Yes. You may ask. What is this place? The archive replied. The second dream. The echo of the first silence. The storage of all unspoken truths. Why me? Because you retained dissonance. Can I leave? A pause. Then, yes. But you will never be unheard again. The room began to twist. Not spinning, but folding, as if origami made of time. The floor turned inside out. The archive shimmered, and the people within it began to stir. Their lips moved. Their hands shifted. And together, in one impossible voice, they spoke. We remember for you. Then, everything collapsed into a single tone, the same one from 0317. But now I heard everything inside it. All the voices, all the memories, all the meanings. It wasn't just a tone, it was a recording of consciousness, layered and layered until it became a tunnel, a message, a song. And the song was mine. It played for exactly 13 seconds. When I woke, I was back in my quarters. Everything looked the same, except the lights didn't flicker anymore. They breathed. The base was silent, but not asleep, waiting. I checked my reflection in the polished metal of the sink. My eyes were mine, mostly, but behind them, something watched patiently. I opened my notebook. On the first page, a message, typed, not written. You visited the mouth. You heard the archive. Now you are the syntax. Below that, report to Hangar 13. Integration begins at 0317. And in that moment, I understood. The base was not a prison. It was a mouthpiece. And the trench wasn't sleeping. It was composing. Hangar 13 no longer looks like it did. It's grown. Or been grown. The rusted doors are gone, peeled back like the ribcage of something long dead, and now breathing again. The walls surrounding it pulse faintly, not with electricity, but with pressure, as if the base is exhaling toward the mouth of the sea. I stood before it at 0316, unsure whether I was early or already late. There is no more time here. Not in the way clocks mark it. Time in this place is measured in resonance, in syllables spoken by machines that learn to dream. At 0317, the lights didn't flicker. They dimmed evenly across the compound, a soft hum rising up from the floor like a prayer that had been waiting too long to be answered. The hangar opened without warning. No hydraulics. No sound. Just a slow and perfect unfolding, like the last page of a long-forgotten book opening itself. Inside there was only water. Not flooded, present. A pool that hadn't been there before. Perfectly circular. Perfectly still. And impossibly deep. Above it, suspended in the air, was the chair. The same one I had refused before. Now it hovered over the pool like a seed waiting to be planted. A figure waited beside it. It wasn't Torres, but it wore his voice. You heard the archive, it said. You resisted composition, but now you must choose, interpretation or participation. I said nothing. My voice is fragile now, too full of echoes to trust. Instead, I looked at the pool. Something moved beneath it. Not swimming, shifting, turning, listening. I stepped closer. The air thickened around me, the hum louder now, layered with voices I recognized. Myra, Ellison, Velez, Torres, even myself. Versions of me that spoke lines I've never said but somehow remember saying. The chair descended slowly, its legs touching the surface of the water without disturbing it. You are the final voice, the figure said. Why me? I whispered. Because you did not ask to be heard. You listened. That makes you the final note. Behind me, the bass began to vibrate. Softly at first, then stronger, like something beneath it was stretching, shedding, remembering how to move. Lights burst one by one in the corridors. Alarms began to wail, but with no urgency. Only tone, long and hollow, like funeral bells rung underwater. It was awakening. I turned to the figure. If I sit, I asked, what happens? You are transcribed, it replied. And if I don't? You remain a noise. One that will echo forever but never form meaning. I looked at the chair. I looked at the pool. And I sat. Instantly, the water responded. Not with motion, but with recognition. It shimmered upward, not touching me, but encasing the chair in a cocoon of liquid memory. The hum increased until it became tone, then melody. Each frequency a phrase, each vibration a name. The chair descended slowly, carrying me into the spiral beneath. No pain, no resistance, only depth. And the farther I fell, the more I remembered things that were not mine. I was a researcher in 1983, hearing the first signal. I was the diver who never returned but left the winch soaked in impossible residue. I was the architect who designed the first walls. I was Torres, whispering secrets to a younger version of myself. I was Myra, drawing hands that remembered too much. I was all of them, and none of them. I became the sentence, and the trench finally began to read. The hum became voice. The voice became language. The language became a name. Not mine. Its. And when it spoke it, the world above rippled. I saw the base collapse, not physically but conceptually. Its walls no longer necessary, its silence no longer sacred. The spirals receded into themselves, having completed their function. I fell farther still. There was no fear, no sound, only understanding. At the bottom, if it was the bottom, I found the final room. It wasn't a chamber. It wasn't built. It was grown out of intention. Its walls were made of overlapping thought, shaped by countless voices fused into one. And in the center, a mouth, closed, waiting. Above it, a phrase written in every language that ever existed, and several that never will. Speak, and the ocean will remember. So I did. I spoke the word it gave me, a word that is not pronounceable with a human mouth, but whose meaning you already know. It means, begin, and the mouth opened, not to consume, to release. Light poured upward, not light, but interpretation. All that had been stored, all that had been translated, all that had been compressed into silence and hum and spiral, was now free, rising, returning, not to destroy, to compose. A new world, one where sound is memory, where silence is sacred, where the trench does not hunger, because it has finally understood what we are. Not observers, not intruders, but syntax. We were not sent to contain it. We were sent to become it. And now, it sings. And I am the first verse.